Another thing I was really, really happy to hear with John Tortorella, because he can sometimes, and I think he does it less than maybe the perception, kind of throw his players under the bus a little bit every now and then. We saw it with Field.
He never does that. Never.
I think he does it less than the perception.
That is probably true, but he does do it.
He has been known to do it, even if it's like the Field Sandstrom thing, where he then comes back and apologizes, and it's like, well, you did it, but now you're feeling bad about it. It has happened before. But he was asked about the way the year ended, and like the quote that he gave, like at exit interviews, like he's going to think about it and really kind of, he gave a pretty good explanation for the way the year ended, the things he thinks he's at fault for, and he put it on himself very much. One, he mentioned the goaltending struggled, but it should have. I did that. Like, I know that I wore Sam Ersson down.
It wasn't Sam's fault. That was my decision. Yeah. We rolled the dice, and I don't blame him for the fact he wore down.
Like, the goaltending wore down, and it was a risk I thought was possible, and it happened. Also, the way that they were coached offensively. He said he thinks he had blinders on. The rush-based attack was working so well that he doesn't think they spent nearly enough time working on the forecheck, getting to the net, grinding goals is what he said. Scoring goals with some grind to them. We don't score enough deflections. And that was very apparent in the later part of the season when it's like,
I would agree,
the rush kind of dried up a little.
It dries up a bit. Teams play tighter. Everybody is fully acclimated and mastered their systems. Yeah. The chemistry's there. Line mates have played with each other all the year, so they know where everybody is in the formation. It becomes harder to get those big plays.
Overall, teams are trying harder.
Yeah.
The season is a long season.
Yeah.
There's a reason the President's Trophy winner usually doesn't win the cup. It's the end of the year that really matters, but he thinks it was going so well. John Tortorella thinks the rush-based attacks was working so well, and then when it dried up, they just didn't coach them up enough to score off the cycle, score off the forecheck, get those rebound goals, those second, third opportunity goals, score on deflections. And that was so freaking apparent, and he took accountability for that.
Yeah.
That was good to see. When asked how he's going to change it and if he's going to maybe switch up the styles, he said, we just need to learn to play multiple ways.
Right.
That was cool.
That was cool. And I did like that analysis. I think it's mostly right. I think the one thing he does leave out, though, notably, is not being able to score on the forecheck and around the net ain't the only reason why you had trouble scoring. There was also the 12% power play. That was notably left out. That was also a big part of the lack of goals, John, and you didn't mention that. Now, part of it was net front. They didn't really have a net front presence guy, but they didn't really get anybody who can do that, so I don't know if that problem is being fixed. But I do agree. I agree with him that the forecheck, getting dirty goals, deflections, probably didn't happen enough. What I am curious about, though, is what are you going to do to fix it? Because it's hard. It's hard to... The teams that have been the best at playing multiple styles that I've seen in my time covering hockey are teams where you had one coach for a while who taught one way, then you bring in a new coach who teaches another way, and for 1 or 2 years, that coach teaches a more fast-paced offense. But if they have to, they can switch back to playing torts hockey because, I think of the Rangers under Vigneault. Vigneault opened it up when he took over for Torts, but part of the reason why they got to the Cup final in their first year was that, they could play open it up, running gun hockey. But when they needed to, it was very easy for them to recalibrate and go back to playing torts hockey. Well, I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying it will be tough for Torts and the coaching staff. It'll be a challenge. I think that's the best way to put it. It will be a challenge for them to coach this team in a way where they both remain very good at the transition game, which I do think is a big part of why they were good last year. And Tortorella confirmed today, we ain't going to stop doing that. We want to be good in transition while also being above average or at least average at scoring the other way. It's just going to be a challenge to get them to be good at two completely different types of styles of play. It will be tough.
It will absolutely be tough. Charlie, how shocked were you when John Tortorella mentioned PDO.
Oh, it was good.
That was good. He referenced like the stat that tries to quantify luck.
Yes. In fairness, he called it BPO.
BPO. Yeah, he said something very funny.
It was great. I mean, I immediately knew what he was getting at because at first I thought he was talking about shooting percentage.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "What is it called? BPO?" I'm like, "Is this dude citing PDO?"
He's like, we didn't finish nearly enough, and it's like save percentage and goals for it.
So for those who don't know, who don't know what PDO is actually a pretty older advanced stat. It was discovered, I use discovered in quotes because it was just a bunch of nerds like looking at things on a spreadsheet and we're like, hey, this stat might have value. Basically what they did is they combined team shooting percentage and team save percentage. And what they found is that generally speaking, if you combine those two things, so like a 10% shooting percentage, a 90% team save percentage, generally speaking, most teams at the end of the year end up around 100. That is like the league average of those two things combined. If you have a 95 PDO in over a month time, you're probably going to get better luck over the rest of the season. So it tends to be a measurement of luck. As we've learned more about the stat, it's become more nuanced because, for example, if you have Igor Shesterkin as your goalie, you're probably going to have a PDO over 100. Because your team save percentage is probably going to be at like 92. And as long as you're shooting over 8%, and since the league average shooting percentage is something like 10, like if you're even a league average shooting team and you have Shesterkin, you're going to have a 102. And that doesn't mean you were lucky. It just means you have a great goal. And I think this is the way that Torts was looking at it, was the Flyers did indeed have one of the lowest PDOs last year in the league. They were around 97. Now, part of that obviously was the goaltending. They lost Carter Hart midway through the year. They ran Samuel Ersson to the ground. But the other part of it was that they didn't finish well. They didn't score. They scored goals, but they didn't finish very effectively. They would have have games where they had a lot of shots. They didn't finish on a lot.
They did a great job of outshooting opponents, shot suppression. They put up a decent number of shots
now,
last year.
This is where I go back to the power play thing.
Yeah.
One thing that he didn't mention is that a big reason why teams are shooting better is because they're shooting better on the power play, and the Flyers are not because their power play is trash. But I do also agree with him that it wasn't just the power play.
Yeah.
They could finish better overall. My hope, actually, this is my hope on both sides, on the power play and at 5-on-5. My hope is that Michkov will have a significant impact here, both in terms of getting the power play going and creating better chances for everyone, including him. And at 5-on-5, I'm thinking back to the goal he scored in the rookie game. Torts was saying we need to score greasy goals. We need to be getting to the places where goals are scored more. Forecheck, around the net. Matvei Michkov in that rookie game scored his goal by parking himself in a high danger area and being willing to take a hit to score. I hope that Michkov, number one, is going to score a lot of those goals this year. But number two, maybe his example will drive players to do it a little bit more.
And that's one of the things that, yes, Michkov scored. I've seen plenty of highlights of him scoring on the rush. What has always impressed me about him is his ability to fight through contact and score around the net.
Especially for someone his size.
Especially for someone his size. He scores plenty of goals around the net, and I do think that will be something this team can kind of count on, or at least try to learn from and emulate.
I hope so. But it was very funny with Torts. But also the entire quote was funny because you could tell that they're on some level he understands the stat has value, but on another level, he just hates the fact that he understands it, because the entire quote was, finishing is a very important thing. I think we have one of the lowest, whatever you guys call it. BPO? What do you guys call it? Goals against and shooting percentage. They come up with some damn number. I don't know. They told me some numbers. We need to score. It's just like very much like, okay, this is what it means, but like what it means is that we need to score more goddamn goals.
That is another one of those times where I'm like, I bet he knows it and he's pretending. That's another one of those things.
It's part of the shtick.
I think that's part of his
one
bit.
thing I do, like Brad Shaw especially, but I think Rocky Thompson also to a degree, like they follow this stuff. And from what Torts has revealed to us, he gets a lot of the analytics stuff from them. Okay. They will tell him and they will put it in hockey language so that Torts doesn't immediately like brush it aside as just BS analytics. And then Torts will ask more questions and find out it's actually BS analytics. And they'll be like, okay, well, I liked it better the first way you explained it to me, so do that.
We all silly like the mayor.